We can't display our screen.
Yes, right there.
All right. There we go. Okay. So you want to scroll down onto it? Scroll down. Okay, excellent. You just scroll down to like the section that says science. Okay. Probably to so I'm Eric Bond. I'm here working with Quantify. I met Siegfried while I was working here. He owns a company called InfoViz Consulting. So what we did was based on, here's kind of what Quantify is doing. There's a couple of research papers that are on the link here, and you can read in the outbrief, also on quantify.io. We're quantifying mental health signals on open social media. So through that research, we've attempted to prove that you can tell or classify somebody's mental health state by the things that they're saying. So it's natural language processing, it's machine learning, it's data science. Basically what we can do is we can identify people on social media that are high at risk for suicide or other mental health conditions. So what we can do then is once we have these communities that are at risk, we can start following and looking at what they're talking about. So we can find out who's popular with at-risk individuals. Now what this provides is two things. One of them is you can go back and get metrics on these people for the impacts of things that you're doing with these communities. So if you're holding a hackathon for mental health, you can quantify that response within that specific community that's at risk for those mental health conditions. The other thing is you can amplify your outreach efforts. So in the example in the visualization, we found screen names that were popular within the mental health community that we were tracking today for this, as well as popular overall. So we're running out of time. Here's the viz.
Okay, so
talk about that.
Mouse over a couple things. So we don't have that algorithm here, but so what we did is we grabbed tweets where somebody just mentioned suicide. We're calling those our at-risk population. Then for any of those tweets, when they mention somebody, if somebody gets mentioned a lot, then we're going to call those our popular people, popular amongst people who are at risk. So on the y-axis, we've got how popular they are amongst that at-risk population. On the x-axis, how popular they are in general, how many followers they have. The size of the bubble is how many tweets they have. And if you mouse over, so this, we were going very fast, but this is just their name way up there in the top, and then the list of their the at-risk people following them. And so down here is a word cloud. We would have a word cloud and a list of tweets for everybody. And but when you mouse over somebody, the word cloud becomes the word cloud for that popular person. The list of tweets, the tweets for that person. You could say, get rid of their bubble because you're not, they're just Britney Spears or something, so you don't care about them. And then you could mouse over one of the words in the word cloud and see all the people who are talking about that. And then also this whole thing would be, you'd get another filter for time or group by time so that you could, follow it over hours a day, right? Okay, I think I'm out.
Code's open, data's open, research is open. We'll publish all this on the outbrief.
Awesome, yep, and we have a GitHub where we can put all of our paragraph write-ups and all the resources, so all groups can post to that. And one idea that this team had was we could use social media and the words that people who are at risk, where they're finding, like, where they're getting talked down off the cliff, where they're finding success. Maybe that can help us figure out how to frame what we call this. I have to tell you, from the White House, we had a hard time deciding what do we call this hackathon. Do we call it hack suicide? Do we call it mental health hackathon? We went through so many iterations, and that still is out there. How can we, instead of focusing on suicide or mental illness or things that we don't want, like invisible illnesses, where can we focus on what we do want? We're focusing on the solutions. What do we want to fill that with? And we were talking about, have some suggestions about Hack for Hope. data inclusion. There have been a lot of different iterations, but this type of approach might allow us to have the people who are in these communities tell us what works for them. So I think that's great. Anything from our Shark Tank folks?
One thing in particular there, is there anything that you could look at in your algorithm about usage there? I know sometimes when some people get depressed, their usage would go down a lot. You know, like how many times they post a day, or not just what they post, but just in that. Is there something about that?
I think for this visualization, there's an algorithm for finding the at-risk people. What this visualization is doing is trying to find the people that the at-risk people are interested in and learning as much as we can about them. So this is research into what people are listening to who are at risk. And you could also use it for surveillance of what's going on in that world.
The actual definition of the at-risk personnel is multivariate analysis based on a partial pattern matching of programs and neurolinguistics, which you can read about inside this. Okay. There's a bunch of things that go into that.
I think you developed it.
Absolutely, right?
Awesome. Cool. And I'm going to interrupt to say we have a special guest who just joined us, Megan Smith, the U.S. Chief Technology Officer. So let's give her a warm welcome. This is going to up the game for all the other people. Hey, it's thanks for everybody's time and energy and innovation, and it was great. That was fabulous. There's a guy named Seth Kamabar who I knew on the West Coast, who I think is at Media Lab now, who has some really interesting sentiment and language and word cloud stuff that he's done before. I think looking at the Twitterverse, so I think you guys are onto something, really helpful. It's so great to see all of you, and it's amazing to think that we're joined by colleagues in 4 other cities, and probably some folks online who are inspired and helping us. And this idea of kind of finding things that we all care about and then gathering on a regular basis to hack against solving them is, emergent, happening all over the world. And so I'm really thankful for all of you guys coming together on these particular topics: mental health, suicide, wellness. These are conversations that we need to have as a country and as a world, and solutions that lots of people need. I have my son Alex is here. He's back making a super cool ship back there. He's been playing too much Assassin's Creed Caribbean or something. I just think about he and his brother, who's 13, middle school, and all the challenges that people have, even if they're pretty well. What it takes to grow up in society and the connections for humanity. And so the creativity that we can do, we can add to connecting with each other. In general, what the internet really is for us is significant, amazing. How many people ever saw Clue Train Manifesto or heard of that? It's a book at the beginning of the web, a couple people. There's these folks wrote this great book about many of the trends that have come. And they recently published something called The New Clues. And it's kind of a manifesto or a list of kind of 80 points. And one of the very first things that it says, it's about the internet, and it says the internet is not really a bunch of pipes or plumbing or Wi-Fi routers or whatever. Of course it is, but it's not really. What it says is that the internet's just us connected. And so the idea of using sort of these network technology tools for us to connect to each other. It's interesting because you look through their calls and it has many different things. It says one of them is how did the web get weaponized, which is kind of an interesting point when you think about not only the huge challenges that we have right now with ISIS and recruiting young people, not unlike the Hitler Youth were recruited, but in this new digital way. Or the misogyny and racism and just anti each other, bullying that goes on, the weaponization of hurting each other with the web. And I think you guys are so hopeful because you're the flip side of that. You're the moment of how are we using these tools in profound ways to really engage with each other and see each other better and care about each other and notice, potentially real time, you guys were looking at how we might help. And also, I think over time we'll also figure out ways to help, not just that someone needs help, but maybe big data, it will be helpful to understand trending and what works best, and find best practices to help each other through all the different things. So thanks for being here. I don't know if anybody has any quick questions for me or other things. I want to, you guys are in the middle, you've been here a long time, so I know you're in the middle presenting things. And
Do you have time to watch a couple more pages?
Yeah, you definitely are going to
Right.
see the rest of them. And anyway, any quick questions, anything? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, and look forward to seeing what we do. And as we post it, and the other cities post it, or anyone who's joined online posts, you know, we'll keep this moving and stand on the shoulders of giants who maybe didn't use digital things but solved these problems earlier, and add to that body of work and the solution making that we all hope for. So thank you.
So what team wants to follow that? We got to go really fast. We're losing one of our judges at 4. So who's up next? All right, come on. Don't even, let's just queue up. So everyone stand on the side here, and you're going to go in the order, and we're going to fly for 2 minutes each. So leave.
All right, let's get the projector hooked up.
What's your call your team?
We'll just call ourselves Booz Allen. One, I guess, since we're up first. Sure. Or Booz Allen Machine Learning.
Yeah, for those who arrived a little late, we had groups in different places. At the end of this, we have a list of all the different groups. People will get 3 dots each. Dots are there, and you're going to vote for your top 3 projects, and we're going to crowdsource where you go.
Oh, is that how that works?
Now y'all are here in front of us.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Go ahead. I'm not clueless.
There you go. Maybe that'll be a little better. Unless you want to save it later.
You're very helpful.
This
This is supposed to be intuitive.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Durkin, and I work with Booz Allen Hamilton. In the time that we've been at this hackathon today, 28 people have taken their own lives by suicide. I am tremendously grateful when I look around this room, because every line of code, every algorithm you write, every data set you assemble, and every presentation you give is a way to fight back against those deaths. So what we did was we began to lay the foundations for machine learning. Now, this is not a sophisticated, all-encompassing approach, but rather the very basics of what we can use to apply machine learning techniques, often to the same types of problems solved by clinicians. That's the slide. So this is our team from Booz Allen Hamilton. I'm Sean Durkin, and I will be happy to introduce you to anybody else on the team if you would like, and you can ask me any questions after the presentation or during. And if you could advance the slide, please. So we looked at a series of data. Most of this is available through the United States government. Behavioral risk factor surveillance system, the National Violent Deaths Reporting System, the United States Census for gender, economic status, etc., HIV/AIDS infection rates across the United States, substance abuse and alcoholism, firearm ownership data, unemployment, and income data. And here are the challenges that we basically found in attempting to apply machine learning to these domains. The first is the lack of open data. So despite the efforts by data.gov, the admirable efforts by each of the agencies, and the admirable efforts by the administration, data is relegated to still relegated to a series of different silos. Removing this data from those silos, from the CDC, from the NIH, from SAMHSA, and bringing them together is really where we're going to realize the greatest synergy here. If you advance the slide. So our job is, as you know, machine learning, the most complicated task is often feature engineering, determining which aspects are crucial. We were able to determine that income status was crucial, that unemployment was crucial, that in addition to that, that age and sex factors relate to how people attempt suicide, when they attempt suicide. And we actually created visualization that we'll move to next. So this visualization demonstrates for you the rates of suicide and the rankings for each and every one of the states in the United States. We performed a county level analysis, and this is a state level analysis to reflect that. On the right, you can see suicide rates by sex and age and the trends from 1950 to 2000. So we can see that generally overall the trends have both risen and fallen throughout different age groups, but that we see a large spike around 1990 and a decline in the highest risk population since then. If we look at suicide rates by cause, we find that young males are most likely to attempt suicide with firearms, which is that graph farthest on the left. Now, the reason that that's significant is because firearms data is notoriously difficult to come by within the federal government. The CDC is forbidden from doing research on firearms data due to Congress. As a result, it's very difficult for us to conduct an analysis with firearms and suicide, so as a result, we used firearms sales locations as a proxy variable for that conclusion. So, we also find a pattern within various races. So as you can see, recently, and at later ages, we see that white males actually become at the greatest risk for suicide. So there are two at-risk groups, and oddly enough, they're very contrasting. There are those at the end of life who often attempt suicide by poisoning, and those at the beginning of life who often attempt suicide by firearm. Those two groups probably need very different treatment strategies. If we didn't examine the data from a visual perspective, we would never know that. So just advancing very quickly, we're also able to look at demographic variables, and this breakdown is probably a little bit difficult to see on the screen, but we break down by age, by gender, by social category, by race, and as a result, we see the analysis from 1960 by decade up to 2000 to 2010. We can also view a graph of suicide over time, so we can see that for both black and white males, this declines. The state stays roughly steady with a slight decline for black and white females.
We're gonna run out of time, so can I get our Shark Tank from John?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, I want to hear some feedback from the Shark Tank here. Well, I already know all this. So I don't. I mean, I live and breathe this every day, so you're not telling me anything I don't know, but it's nice. I wouldn't mind a copy.
One of the things is not only you talk about getting that, but even if that lag, even the CDC stuff is usually 2 years behind when you get it.
Right.
With there, that's stuff that I think we definitely have to work on. But also, even with your firearms piece, with there, are you looking at long range shotguns versus handguns? Because most are by handguns, because especially if you from a rural area where there may be a lot of sales, but it may be more shotgun rifle that people are less likely to commit suicide.
So from subject matter experts, we know that most of these occur from handguns, but that data is not available. There's almost no data nationally available on firearm usage, which would be extremely useful.
Well, I mean, even with the sales part that you were able to do.
Right. Yeah, but we did not have that broken down by category.
I didn't know if that was even available.
It's a very good question, but no, we weren't able to obtain that data.
And I think it's really elegant that you confirmed what the literature said. I would caution you about some of the additions that you've made and how they relate and making sure that they correlate census data and with ways that groups are broken down across states.
Absolutely. We were again limited by time. Just looking at it.
It's fantastic.
Yes, no,
It is, yeah.
I have to give all the credit to my team, to our team here.
I think that firearm sales location is a very creative workaround with not knowing where that is, and I think that's a very interesting phenomenon. The young white male group is particularly of importance to the Department of Defense. So I think that's something I haven't seen before. So because they do have some of that information within the DoD that's obviously not open, so but they wouldn't have that. So that was nice.
Will you guys be able to make this open source, or at least open to a smaller community, so you can get feedback and continue this two-way
Absolutely.
discussion?
Sure, absolutely. What the timeline is that on that, I don't know. I'll have a conference with my team.
Okay.
But I'd like to thank you all very much. And again, our goal was to confirm the findings from the subject matter experts using data so that that process can be automated and we can further reduce suicides. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good work.
Nice job. And this is such constructive feedback from over here.
to tell like two separate little stories. So first I wanted to look at some of the open data that's available, some of the data that we use in our work. A lot of it's provided by the CDC. So this is a plot just generated over suicide data available in the United States, given by the CDC. You'll notice there's nothing for 2014 or 2015, and 2016 is a couple days away. So we have this trend, but we have no idea where we actually are. So we think that that's a problem. Let me caution you, I might say like this is a good thing or this is a bad thing when I'm talking about suicide data. Obviously, suicides are bad, but more data is good, so it's a little bit in conflict. So this is an example of state-level data provided by the CDC. This is for New York State. This is the last 4 years or so, and you see that we have a data point for every month. Wonderful. Again, bad suicides, but this is Wyoming. For the reasons of anonymization and HIPAA compliance, the CDC will not provide any granular information if there are fewer than 10 occurrences in a given month or a particular, however you want to slice the data. So this is the problem for creating our models. The CDC, in some cases, also provides county-level information, and then this is gets even worse. This is just a random county in the United States, and those are the data points that we have available for suicides over the last 4 years. It's very hard to do any kind of trend analysis, so I don't know if there's anything that we can be doing to better anonymize our data. So I looked at the last 4 years data, and if we look only at states, there's 2,400 possible data points for 50 states in 48 months. What's actually available is 2,200 or so data points for 94% coverage. Of the 166 counties that the CDC provides data for, if you look at a per month basis, the CDC has all of this data, but what's made publicly available is only 32%. So I find that very hard to work with. I think it just kind of underscores why we're all here. We should really be working hard to try to make more and more data available. So we've touched on two data problems that we have in the community, and that data is stale, and the data that does exist has holes. So changing topics slightly, somewhere where we don't have a lack of data is using social media. So we think with social media we can measure mental health where it happens. This is like direct from the mouth of people that are living with these conditions. And using machine learning, we can analyze this to both help individuals and do population level analysis. So we've worked to develop a data set, which we hope to maybe someday be able to release. Right now we have anonymization concerns as well, but we've gone and labeled this data for people who have self-identified as being diagnosed with these conditions. So we've been able to build machine learning models to detect these conditions. So this is an example of suicide ideation. We've picked some neurotypical people, as well as some people who have said that they tried committing suicide on X date. We took their tweets before actually committing and then analyzed their language usage. So we apply this to many people, and we see that there's a very noisy signal, but we can clearly separate the people who are thinking about potentially committing suicide and those who don't seem to be, just based on their language usage. And finally, then I took those two things together. We were able to sample from the Twitter feed the tweets across the United States. So we had a backlog of tweets from 2013, ran these models over them, and then compared them to CDC estimates. So this is a comparison between suicidal ideation and actual completed suicides. And you see that there are some states that we completely miss on, and we need to do more research as to why, and there could be some sampling issues there. But there is a pretty dramatic correlation in most states between the data that we were able to calculate based on our models of Twitter and the actual CDC data. Finally, one thing that I want to underscore is that I heard some people say that they were looking at
linguistics, and I wanted to pull out words that people use. But a lot of the people that say, I'm going to kill myself, aren't the people that are actually committing suicide. So some of these word-based approaches really aren't as powerful as they otherwise might seem. What really matters is how people are using language. So we use language and engrams and just language structure more than actual words. Sorry, there's a lot of labels, but the blue and yellow lines are using LIWC. It's a psychological published word dictionary, which essentially identifies words that people might use if they're feeling, or that they might use more often if they have PTSD in this case. So we scored some data using those previous models, then we use these more pattern of language usage models. And if you're not familiar with a rock plot, you want to be in that top left corner. You see that using more than just words is dramatically more effective than looking at words alone.
Sneaking back from the shark tank, or sorry, dolphin tank. And then we got to really, while you're taking down your computer, the next group can set up. What do you know?